You're listening to Reformed Thinking. All right, today we're jumping into a really interesting idea from C.S. Lewis. He makes this case that Christian morality isn't just some big list of rules, do's and don'ts. He says it's actually a practical technique.
Right, and that's the exact phrase he uses, a technique for putting the human machine right. And, as soon as you say technique for fixing the human machine, what else pops into your head? For a lot of people, in his day, and even ours, it's psychoanalysis. So how do these two things fit together? Are they rivals, or are they doing completely different jobs?
Well, Lewis's whole argument kicks off from a pretty simple idea. If you want a better world, you've got to start with better people. I mean, it's kind of hard to follow the golden rule if you're not the kind of person who even wants to, right? So for Lewis, Christian morality gives us the specification for that kind of person. It's the blueprint for the human machine.
Okay, so let's break that down. Lewis is super clear on this point. Even though morality and psychoanalysis might look like they're working on the same stuff, he says nope, they're designed for two totally different tasks.
So you can really see the contrast here. Christian morality is laser-focused on one thing, the choice you make. The problem it's trying to solve is sin, a moral failure, and the action it calls for is repentance. But psychoanalysis, that's playing on a whole different field. It's dealing with the raw psychological stuff before you even make a choice. It looks at abnormal feelings not as a sin, but as a disease. And the goal isn't repentance, it's a cure.
And this is such a key distinction that Lewis makes. He basically splits Freud in two. You've got Freud, the medical specialist on one hand, and Freud, the amateur philosopher on the other. Lewis had no problem with the medical technique of psychoanalysis itself, as a tool to help cure someone's neuroses. That's not against Christianity. What is against Christianity is the atheistic worldview that Freud decided to tack onto his work.
Yeah, and that brings us right to the heart of his argument. Think about any decision you make. Lewis says there are always two parts to it. First, there's your psychological raw material, all your feelings, your impulses, your fears. And second, there's the choice you freely make using that material. Morality, he says, only cares about part two.
So what exactly does he mean by raw material? Well, think about it like this. You've got normal feelings, the stuff we all have, like a natural fear of real danger. But then you've got abnormal feelings, things that come up from the subconscious, like a totally irrational fear of cats. Psychoanalysis is designed to work on those abnormal feelings, to try and fix that faulty psychological wiring.
Lewis gives this fantastic analogy with 3 soldiers to make it really clear. So, soldier number 1, he has normal, healthy fear, and through moral effort, he becomes brave. Simple enough. But the other 2 soldiers, they have an irrational, crippling fear. It's a disease. A psychoanalyst comes in and cures them. So now, all 3 men are on a level playing field, and it's only at that moment that the real moral question kicks in. What are they going to do now? One chooses to do his duty, but the other one, he decides to just look out for number 1. That choice, that's the moral one.
And this really gets to his main point. He says, the bad psychological material is not a sin, but a disease. It does not need to be repented of, but to be cured. That's a huge statement. Bad psychological wiring isn't a sin, it's an illness. And if that's true, well, it has absolutely massive consequences for how we ought to think about God's judgment.
Right, because if sin is all about the choices we make and not about the psychological hand we're dealt, then everything we thought we knew about God's judgment gets turned on its head. It means God is looking at us in a completely different way than we look at each other.
Think about it. We humans, we judge what we can see, right? We see the external actions, the final product. But God sees the whole process. He doesn't just see the result, he judges based on the internal choice. What you did with the raw material you were given, whether that material was good, bad, or just plain difficult.
And this leads to some pretty shocking reversals of what we'd expect. From God's point of view, a person with a crippling neurosis who forces himself to pick up a cat to be kind, that might be an act of greater courage than a perfectly healthy soldier winning a medal in battle. Or a tiny little act of kindness from a man who was only ever taught cruelty. That might be a bigger moral victory than a huge sacrifice from someone who had every advantage growing up. See, God's not judging the polish of the final product, he's judging the effort that went into the choice. Lewis paints this incredibly vivid picture of the final judgment. He says, look, at the moment of death, all that psychological baggage we carry around, the good digestion that made you cheerful, the bad nerves that made you crabby, all of it just falls away. And what's left, standing there completely naked, is what he calls the real central man, the part of you that actually makes the choices. And he says, when we all see that for what it really is, oh, there are going to be some surprises.
So, where does all this lead? It brings us to the final, and maybe the most critical point. Our choices aren't just individual events that get marked down on some cosmic scoreboard. No, they're much more than that. They are actively, moment by moment, building the very person we are going to be, forever.
Lewis puts it this way. Every single time you make a choice, you are turning that central part of you, the part that does the choosing, into something a little bit different than it was before. It's like you're turning a little screw inside yourself, one way or the other. And over the course of a whole lifetime, all those little turns are slowly shaping your core self into one of two very different kinds of things.
And here they are, the two final states Lewis lays out. On one side, you have the heavenly creature. This is a person who's in harmony with God, in harmony with other people, and in harmony with himself. It's a state of pure joy, peace, and knowledge. On the other side, you have the hellish creature. This is a person in a constant state of war with God, with others, and with himself. A state of madness, horror, and just total loneliness. And the kicker is, these aren't rewards or punishments handed out from the outside. They're simply the internal reality that we have been building, for ourselves, one choice at a time.
So the question Lewis leaves us with is incredibly direct and personal. It's not about what you did yesterday, and it's not about what you plan on doing tomorrow. It's about this moment, right now. With the very next choice you make, which creature are you building?